Most people remember the exact moment they lost it. Not a relationship, not an opportunity. The feeling of having nothing in the bank. That specific hollow awareness that lands somewhere between your chest and your stomach. When you check your balance and realize that whatever comes next, a flat tire, a medical copay, a week where work slows down, you have no answer for it. Nothing to absorb it. No room. Just exposure. That feeling doesn't announce itself dramatically. It doesn't arrive with sirens. It settles in quietly, like a low-grade fever you've stopped noticing because you've had it for so long. You go to work, you come home, you spend what needs to be spent. You tell yourself you'll figure it out. And underneath every decision you make, every meal, every purchase, every career choice, every relationship, that feeling is running silently in the background. Most of the financial world talks about millions, about portfolios and retirement accounts and passive income thresholds that feel like they belong to a different species of human being. But that's not where financial transformation actually begins. It begins much earlier, much more quietly. It begins at $10,000. And what happens to a person, psychologically, neurologically, behaviorally, when they cross that number for the first time is one of the most under-examined stories in personal finance. To understand why $10,000 matters so disproportionately, you first have to understand what life looks like without it. The Federal Reserve conducts an annual survey on the economic well-being of American households, and for years, one finding has remained stubbornly consistent. Roughly 40% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. Not $4,000, not $40,000, $400. Sit with that number for a moment. A car repair, a dental emergency, a broken appliance, an unexpected copay. These are not catastrophic events. These are ordinary disruptions of ordinary life. And for nearly half the country, any one of them is enough to unravel a month. This is the financial baseline most people are actually navigating. Not the aspirational version of personal finance that dominates YouTube thumbnails and bestseller lists. The real version. The one where you're not investing because there's nothing left after rent.
The one where the credit card balance doesn't go down. It just moves. The one where saving money is a concept that exists somewhere in a future you can't quite see from where you're standing. And the thing that makes this so psychologically significant, so much harder to escape than most people realize, is that living without financial margin doesn't just create stress. It systematically degrades the cognitive tools you need to escape it. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard conducted a series of studies on the cognitive effects of financial scarcity. What they found was both illuminating and quietly devastating. When people are consumed by financial stress, when the mind is occupied with how to cover immediate expenses, with mental arithmetic that runs constantly in the background, the cognitive load this creates is equivalent to losing roughly 13 IQ points of functional mental capacity. That's not a metaphor or an exaggeration. That's measurable, testable cognitive bandwidth simply disappearing because it's been requisitioned by financial anxiety. For comparison, losing 13 IQ points is roughly equivalent to the cognitive impairment caused by missing an entire night of sleep. So we live in a world that expects financially stressed people to make smart, long-term decisions about money, about investing, about career moves, about spending patterns, while those same people are operating under a form of cognitive taxation that they didn't choose and can't easily escape. This is why the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is so difficult to break from the inside. It's not a discipline problem. It's not a character flaw. It is a system that consumes the very resources you need to escape it. And $10,000 is where that system first begins to loosen its grip. Here's what $10,000 actually does when it arrives in someone's life for the first time. Not theoretically, practically. It converts approximately 25 different categories of financial threat: a car repair, a medical bill, a month of reduced income, an unexpected travel expense, a home appliance failure, from emergencies into inconveniences.
$18, plus tip, plus the service fee that appears at the end that you've stopped fully registering. You feel understimulated, disconnected, vaguely restless. You scroll. An algorithm that has been studying your behavior for months serves you an advertisement for something that promises, on some level, to close the gap between how you feel and how you want to feel. You buy it. For a moment, it works. And then it doesn't. And the cycle restarts. The subscription services, the new clothing that marks a chapter you were hoping to start, the upgraded phone that signals a version of yourself you're working toward, the restaurant meal that felt like a reward for surviving the week, the travel that represents the version of life you're promising yourself you'll eventually inhabit. None of these are wrong. None of them are shameful. But when they are consistently financed by money that was supposed to accumulate into security, when they exist in direct competition with the savings that would quiet your financial nervous system, they carry an opportunity cost that most people never calculate. Let's calculate it, because the numbers here are genuinely striking. The average American household spends approximately $3,000 per year on dining out, about $1,200 per year on clothing, subscriptions, streaming, music, apps, cloud storage, gym memberships used twice a month, average around $200 to $300 monthly for a modern household, which is $2,400 to $3,600 annually. And these are just a few categories in a spending ecosystem that has been precisely calibrated to absorb every dollar that isn't otherwise committed. Now consider that $10,000 savings target. For many households, the gap between where they are and $10,000 in liquid savings is not income. It's these categories. It's the $200 a month that goes to subscriptions for services they barely use, the $150 a month that disappears into food delivery, the slow accumulation of small automated charges that are never quite painful enough to cancel but never quite valuable enough to justify. $350 redirected per month, not eliminated, redirected, reaches $10,000 in less than 29 months, under 2.5 years. But here's what makes that 29-month period feel impossible for many people. It requires sustained impulse regulation in an environment designed to defeat impulse regulation. Every app, every advertisement, every social feed, every friend's weekend plans is a gentle, persistent invitation to spend the money that would otherwise become safety. The battlefield is not your bank account. It's your attention. And your attention has never been more expensively contested. There's a psychological concept called present bias. It describes the very consistent human tendency to overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future benefits, even when the future benefit is logically, obviously larger. Behavioral economists have studied this extensively. In classic experiments, most people will choose $100 today over $150 in 1 month, even when they know, intellectually, consciously, that waiting is the objectively better decision. The present reward exerts a gravitational pull that the future reward cannot fully counteract. This is not irrationality. This is evolution. For most of human history, the future was genuinely uncertain. Deferring gratification was sometimes genuinely dangerous. The ancestors who prioritized immediate resources over uncertain future ones were, in many environments, the survivors. But modern financial life has inverted this equation completely. In a world of compound interest, automated investment accounts, and passive income generation, the future is where the real rewards live. And our deeply human present bias is in constant, quiet conflict with the behaviors that would actually serve us. The person who chooses the $6 coffee every morning isn't being careless with $6. They're expressing millions of years of evolutionary programming that says The thing in front of you is real. The future is not. The $10,000 milestone matters partly because it is large enough to begin rewiring that calculus. Once you've seen a significant number grow in an account, once the future has become concrete enough to visualize, to log into, to watch increase, the future starts to feel real in a way it didn't before. The abstraction becomes evidence, and evidence changes behavior in ways that good intentions rarely do. Let's talk about what happens after $10,000, because the financial journey doesn't end there. It transforms. Once you have $10,000 in liquid savings, genuinely available, not theoretically accessible, something specific happens to your financial psychology. You begin, for the first time, to think about what comes next without the weight of what might go wrong. And that mental freedom, that absence of constant threat management, is when real financial growth typically begins. Because the next question is no longer, how do I survive an emergency? It's, what do I do with what I'm no longer spending on surviving emergencies? This is where the conversation shifts from saving to investing. And this is where the mathematics of financial life become genuinely exciting. $10,000 invested in a diversified index fund earning a historically conservative 7% annual return doesn't stay $10,000. In 10 years, it becomes approximately $19,700 without a single additional contribution, without any additional decision, simply by existing in a vehicle that compounds over time. In 20 years, it becomes nearly $38,700. In 30 years, which for a 30-year-old represents retirement age, that single $10,000 decision becomes over $76,000. But no one stops at $10,000. Once the behavior changes, once the saving and investing become automatic, structural, identity-level habits, the contributions continue. Add $500 a month to that $10,000 initial investment at 7% annual return. In 10 years, approximately $106,000. In 20 years, approximately $272,000. In 30 years, approximately $601,000. Just $500 a month, the cost of one car payment and a few dinners out, redirected, compounding, growing into something that eventually generates more income passively than many people earn actively. At $600,000 in a portfolio returning 7% annually, the passive income generated is $42,000 per year, without showing up, without a commute, without a manager, without a performance review. That number, that specific possibility, begins at $10,000. Not at the million, at the 10,000. Here's where the identity dimension of this becomes psychologically critical. Most people who struggle to save $10,000 are not struggling because they lack the math skills to understand compound interest. They're struggling because their identity, the story they carry about who they are in relation to money, does not yet include the version of themselves who has $10,000. This sounds abstract until you examine it closely. Identity is the most powerful predictor of behavior. More than motivation, more than willpower, more than knowledge. What people do consistently aligns with who they believe themselves